Someone underestimated you. Maybe recently, maybe years ago. Maybe it's happening right now and you can feel it, the way they look at you, or more accurately, the way they don't. The way your idea gets dismissed before it's finished. The way they give the opportunity to someone else, and the explanation they offer doesn't even have the decency to be specific. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was a system. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of 100 small dismissals that didn't individually feel like much, but together communicated something unmistakable. We don't think you're capable of what you think you're capable of. I want you to sit with that feeling for a moment, not to wallow in it, not to let it collapse into bitterness, but to feel exactly what it is. Because that feeling, that specific, sharp, clarifying feeling of being underestimated by someone whose opinion you once gave weight to, is one of the most valuable resources a man can possess. If he knows how to use it. Machiavelli knew. He was underestimated for most of his life. Dismissed from the Florentine government, he served faithfully for 14 years, imprisoned and tortured under suspicion of conspiracy, exiled to his family's small farm in Sant'Andrea, while the men he had counseled continued without him, convinced they didn't need what he offered. He was, by every external measure, finished, irrelevant. A man whose moment had passed before it fully arrived. And in that exile, in that complete and total dismissal, he wrote The Prince, a book that has shaped the thinking of kings, presidents, generals, and CEOs for 500 years. A book that every single person who dismissed him is now entirely forgotten by. He didn't just survive being underestimated. He used it. He converted every dismissal into clarity, every closed door into focus, every underestimation into the specific kind of concentrated fury that only comes from a man who has been told he is less than he is and has decided to make that the most expensive mistake his dismissers ever made. That is the model. Not revenge in the petty sense, not getting even, getting undeniable. Let me show you the psychology of why being underestimated is actually an advantage, because most men who are in this position don't see it that way. They see it as an obstacle, as evidence of their failure, as confirmation of the doubt they already carry about themselves. And that interpretation is the only way being underestimated actually hurts you. The dismissal itself is neutral. It is information. What matters entirely is what you do with it. The man who is overestimated has a completely different problem. He has to maintain a perception he may not yet have earned. He has to protect the expectation that was set for him before he was ready to meet it. He spends energy managing how he is seen, rather than becoming what he needs to become. The expectations become a prison. The attention becomes a pressure. The visibility becomes a liability. The man who is underestimated has none of these problems. Nobody is watching him closely enough to notice what he is building. Nobody has set expectations he has to manage. Nobody is scrutinizing his progress. He operates in a kind of productive invisibility, free to work, free to fail, free to iterate, free to become something completely different from what anyone around him expected. And when he emerges from that invisibility, the gap between what they expected and what he has become is the most devastating statement he will ever make. And he won't even have to make it. It makes itself. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school varsity basketball team. He has spoken about this dismissal for decades, not because it wounded him, but because he weaponized it. He stored the feeling of that cut, the specific humiliation of being told he wasn't good enough for that team, at that level, by those coaches. And he spent the rest of his career using that stored feeling as fuel. Not consciously every day, in a therapeutic way, as a standard, as a baseline, as the answer to every moment of temptation to stop, to rest, to settle, the coaches who cut him from that team, the reminder that someone once looked at him and decided he wasn't worth a spot. This is what psychologists call the chip on the shoulder effect, the psychological mechanism by which a perceived slight, a dismissal, an underestimation is converted into sustained performance motivation. It is not the healthiest source of fuel in the long run, but it is among the most powerful in the short term, and the men who have learned to access it deliberately, to hold the memory of their dismissal with enough clarity that it still stings when they need it to, have an advantage over men who are performing from a place of comfort. Machiavelli had this in abundance. His entire intellectual output after his exile reads like the work of a man with something to prove, not to the princes who dismissed him, to history, to anyone who would ever ask what this man, this twice exiled, once tortured, permanently overlooked Florentine civil servant, was actually capable of. The answer is still being discovered 5 centuries later. Now let me give you the practical framework, because inspiration without structure is just emotion, and emotion without direction is just noise. Here is how you actually convert being underestimated into something that makes people regret it. Step 1. Stop announcing. This is the first and most important instruction, and most men fail it immediately. When you have been underestimated and you decide to do something about it, the instinct is to tell people, to say, "Watch what I'm about to do," to post about your plans, to announce your intentions, to get the validation of having people say, "Yes, we believe you," before you have done anything worth believing. Resist this completely. Machiavelli understood that the man who announces his strategy has already compromised it, because now the people who doubted, you know what to watch for. They know when to compare what you said against what you did. They can measure your progress against your promises and find you lacking at every intermediate stage. But the man who says nothing and builds in silence, that man presents the world with a finished product, not a work in progress, not an intention, a fact. And facts are impossible to argue with in the way that intentions are endlessly debatable. Keep your mouth shut. Build in the dark. Let the result be the announcement. Step 2. Convert every dismissal into data. Every time someone underestimates you, they are telling you something specific about their model of who you are. That model is wrong, but understanding why they hold it is useful. Were you underestimated because you hadn't yet demonstrated competence? Then the answer is to build competence. Were you underestimated because you failed to communicate your capabilities effectively? Then the answer is to demonstrate rather than communicate. Were you underestimated because the person doing the underestimating is themselves limited and cannot recognize what they're looking at? Then their opinion is not data about you at all. It is data about them, and you can file it accordingly and move on. The point is to not let the dismissal be meaningless. Give it a function. Make it work for you. Store it. Use it. Let it inform the quality and consistency of what you build. Step 3. Build something undeniable. This is where most men who have been underestimated fail. They focus on the regret they want the dismisser to feel rather than on the work that would create it. They are oriented toward the outcome rather than the process. And that misorientation is fatal to the process. Because the only thing that will actually make anyone regret underestimating you is the quality of what you build, not your attitude, not your narrative, not your social media presence. The actual, real, measurable undeniable thing you create. What does undeniable look like? It looks like results that speak without context, revenue, skills, a body of work, a physical transformation, a professional achievement, something that a person who dismissed you can encounter without explanation and understand immediately that they were wrong. You do not need to be there when they encounter it. You do not need to see their face. You do not need their acknowledgement. The undeniable thing exists, regardless of whether anyone acknowledges it. That is what makes it undeniable. Step 4. Be patient. This is the hardest part, because the desire to show people they were wrong has urgency to it. You want them to regret it now. You want the vindication immediately. But the fastest comebacks are rarely the most complete ones. The man who responds to dismissal within weeks has proven something small. The man who responds within years has proven something permanent. Machiavelli's vindication took decades, and it has lasted 5 centuries. The timeline of your response should match the size of your ambition. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active building with the understanding that the result will come when the work is done, rather than when you are ready for it to come. Every day you spend building is a day you are moving toward the moment when your dismissers encounter what you've made. Some of them will never admit they were wrong. Most of them won't. That is not the point. The point is what you have become in the process of proving them wrong. That is yours permanently. Their regret is just a byproduct. Step 5. When the moment comes, say nothing. This is the final and most powerful instruction. When the tables have turned, and if you do the work, they will resist every instinct to say, "I told you so," to remind them of their dismissal, to perform your vindication in front of them. The man who says nothing when he has won communicates something that words never could. He communicates that this was never about them, that the work was always for something larger than their opinion of him, that their regret, while noted, is not the point, and never was. Machiavelli never got to see the full extent of his vindication. He died before the prince became what it became. He never stood in front of the princes who dismissed him and watched them read his words. He never saw the regret. And it didn't matter, because the work was never about the regret. It was about the truth he had to say. The regret was just what happened to the people who didn't listen when he was alive. That is the final lesson. Make the work so real, so complete, so permanently true, that it outlasts the question of whether anyone regrets underestimating you. Build something that will still be making a case for you long after the people who dismissed you are gone. They underestimated you. Good. Now go make that the most expensive mistake they ever made. Not with anger, with excellence. Not with revenge, with results. Not with noise, with a silence, so full of what you've built that the room goes quiet when you enter it. Subscribe to Mindplicit, for men who store every dismissal and spend it wisely.